Hey, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to another Persona Challenge video. And yeah, I know, it's been a while and I haven't been uploading much lately, but I mean, these types of videos do take me a while to make, and it's also why I even take a break from doing these types of videos. But hey, we're back, and this time we're going to see if it's possible to beat Persona 4 Golden while only using Narukami. You guys really loved the Persona 3 version of this challenge, and it's still popping off as of now, so I'd like to thank everyone who supported the video, as I really do work hard on these challenge runs. And if you guys have not seen it yet, I recommend you give it a watch, but not right now since y'all are already here. Anyways, I don't think I have much to say besides the rules, so yeah, let's get into that. Now, the rules for this challenge are quite simple. Number 1, until I can remove party members, I must be alone at all times. The one thing I am changing to this rule is that this time I am going to allow the navigator's assistance because, honestly, I'm gonna mostly need it for the end game. 2, I must be playing on a new save. 3, I must be playing on the hardest difficulty. And a little side note, since I am playing on the PC version, I can actually make some adjustments to the difficulty. The only thing I'm gonna change here is the retries in dungeon because honestly, I just only care about the combat, and I'm sure many of you do too. And really, I just see this as a waste of time to lose a fight to something dumb and have none of your progress saved. So yeah, that is why I'm gonna be changing this only. And number 4, because I am playing on the PC version, I cannot use any mods or hacks to gain an advantage. And before we get into this challenge, I should let you all know that this will not be an accurate telling of the story, so I advise that you leave if you've never played this game before, especially since there will still be spoilers. And with all that said, let's get straight into the challenge. So I begin my new save and select very hard because, yes, I definitely hate myself. We arrive at Yasu Inaba and meet our Uncle Dojima and cousin Nanako, who we will be staying with for the year. And we all just had dinner that night. Later on, Yu decides to have a dream about the run as he's just fighting someone on his own. The next day was our first day of school where we meet Chie, Yukiko, and Yosuke. Later that day, Chie tells us about a rumor spreading around town called the Midnight Channel, where if you stare into a powered-off TV on a rainy night, you'll see your soulmate. We decided to try out this rumor ourselves, and we were actually able to see someone in there, but then we stuck our hand and almost fell in. We told Yosuke and Chie about this and even showed it off to them, and then we all fell in. Then some bear whose name is Teddy appeared and told us to screw off, and now we're back in the real world. Next day, the principal announces that one of the students named Saki Konishi was found dead earlier this morning. We had a feeling her death could be related to the world inside of the TV, so we decided to go back in there to see what we could find. While we were investigating, we came across some shadows, and then Yu awakens to his persona, Izanagi, and now begins our first battle. And obviously, since we're the only ones that can fight, literally anyone can get past this on their own since the shadows aren't hard and that they're weak to electricity. After we win the fight, we then encounter Yosuke's shadow. After he denies himself, his shadow goes berserk, and now we get ourselves into another fight, and already was our first boss fight, which once again, anyone can do on their own. What you have to do is just hit him with Zio and then block whenever he does, or whenever he charges. On my first attempt, I actually got unlucky as he hit me with a crit, but I was able to get him on my second attempt no problem. Yosuke then accepts himself and gains the persona Jiraiya, and we go back and call it a day. Later that night, we see that someone else appears on the Midnight Channel, but we can't tell who it is since it was just a silhouette. Next day, we begin our first social link with Yosuke, and once again, since social links do make our personas stronger through fusions, they're going to be a huge help in this run. Later, we discuss who that person could be on the Midnight Channel, and we might be thinking that it's Yukiko. We checked once again to see, and as it turns out, it was Yukiko. And on top of that, she even went missing. So we went back to the TV world to go rescue her and begin exploring our first dungeon. Now before we get into the dungeon, there is one thing I want to say that's very important. As you all probably know, in Persona 3, whenever we return to the entrance of Tartarus, our HP and SP would fully replenish. In this game, however, that isn't the case, as the only way to do that is by going back into the real world. So now you ask, how was I able to manage this? Well, you see this chest here? If you open it, it gives you an item, right? Now what happens if you go back to the entrance? Well, as you can see, we can open it again and get another item. Now, the chests in this dungeon give us items like peach seeds, life stones, and most importantly, snuff souls and soul drops, which are items that replenish our SP. I decided to take advantage of this and grind for as many snuff souls and soul drops as I can so that I am able to replenish my SP without having to go back to the real world and waste days just doing that. In fact, I could even beat any of the dungeons in one day just by doing this, which is very helpful since I'll have more time with social links. So yeah, if you guys ever ask how I was able to manage my SP, this is exactly what I did. Anyways, moving forward, the shadows in this dungeon weren't hard, but one thing I'll say though, and this applies in every dungeon as well, and that is, as long as you can hit their weaknesses, you'll actually stand a chance against them. Despite the battle system being completely different from Persona 3's, where now they'll get a turn after getting knocked, it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be because I can easily kill them all by just hitting their weaknesses. However, in early game, I advise that you stay away from shadows that either have no weaknesses or that'll kill you in 1 or 2 hits, because those shadows are really hard to take out. But in like the last few dungeons, you won't have to worry about that, and you'll see why. We later find Chie, who encounter her shadow, and once again, we get into a fight after she denies herself. Now, the Shadow Chie fight isn't even that hard, but I kinda did make it hard for myself, simply because for some reason I thought she was weak to electric moves, but she's actually weak to wind. And so, that's why I didn't even bother to get a wind skill card from Shuffle Time, so yeah, that is actually my bad. Regardless though, I was still able to take her out even without it, so yeah. I mean, all I have to say is just heal yourself if your health is below 50 because she throws out ice and physical moves that deal around 20 to 40 damage, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, I know I made this hard for myself, but hey, I was still able to manage, okay? Chie then accepts herself and gains the persona Tomoe, and our job here is done for now. Once we get back, we form the investigation team and begin the full social link, and also beginning Chie's next day, and we go back the next day to go save Yukiko. Hey guys! So yeah, I think you might already notice a small problem here. So yeah, as you can see, I have party members with me. Why, you ask? Well, seeing how earlier I couldn't remove Yosuke from the team when we first entered the dungeon, I assumed that I couldn't remove party members yet, but as it turns out I actually could have. Regardless though, even without them, you can still get through this whole dungeon on your own. As I said before, you just need to make sure you can hit their weaknesses and also avoid shadows that don't have any or that can kill you in only 1 or 2 hits. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. And I promise you, yes, this is still possible to do solo and that my party members did nothing besides guard. So yeah. Let's just get back to this challenge now. As we get through the dungeon, we run into our first mid-boss, the Avenger Knight. Now, this fight is actually very easy as he's weak to fire, and we can even make him dizzy to waste a turn. Another thing too is that he attacks you every 3 turns because he likes to put up a firewall, then either raise his attack or charge, and then he attacks you. So it gives you enough time to heal and then block. And as we get to the end of the fight, he runs out of SP, so now he starts attacking every 2 turns. But still not much of a problem, and that's pretty much it for the fight. As we move on, we've reached the end where Yukiko is at, and like always, the shadow gets denied and now we have to fight. Now, on my first attempt, I wasn't really trying to win or anything, but instead wanted to see if I was even ready for this fight, and as it turns out, I'm not, because she uses a move called Double Fangs, and if you even get hit by it once, you're already dead, and there's no telling when she'll even throw it out. So I decided to grind a little more, and then fused Iligor, who will resist physical moves, and Sendri, who nulls fire moves. And now it was time to fight her for real. Now, there are 4 different phases in this fight. In the first phase, her pattern is quite simple. First, she goes for White Wall if you hit her with Bufu, then she does Passionate Stare where she does nothing, then it's Burning Ashes, and finally she throws out either Double Fangs or Agi, and then the pattern repeats. Nothing too crazy happens here, and it was a lot easier to get around with the new personas I just fused. After about half of her HP is gone, we get into the second phase where she summons a Charming Prince. For this, I recommend you get rid of the Charming Prince first before fighting Yukiko, and another thing to keep in mind is that Yukiko's pattern changed in this phase. So first is still White Wall, but then she attacks with either Agi or Double Fangs, then she does Passionate Stare and then Burning Ashes, and it repeats from there. Even with all this, it was actually still easy to get around since the prince didn't really do much. And after nearly killing the prince, he runs away, and now we get into the third phase. And she's a lot more aggressive in this phase. Like seriously, there's no patterns here as she just keeps attacking me. So all I can say is just be very careful and attack whenever you have the chance to do so. Cause yeah, like this is just one of those times where you have to be very patient or else you'll die. After taking a quarter of her HP, we now go into the final phase where she'll start using a move called Terror Voice every 2 turns. So really, all you have to do is attack one turn and then the next just block, because if her Terror Voice connects, you'll be hit with Fear, where your turn will skip, and then she'll use an almighty move called Shivering Rondo, where you're pretty much dead in only 1 hit. So yeah, it's that simple now, and with all that said, Shadow Yukiko goes down. After that, Yukiko accepts herself and gains the persona Konohana Sakuya, and now we wait for her to recover. During this time, I began Marie and Ko's social links, and once Yukiko recovered, there wasn't much plot happening, so yeah. During that time, I just began Nanako, the Fox, Adachi, and even Yukiko's social links. And as time flew by, another person by the name of Kanji Tatsumi has appeared on the Midnight Channel, so now it was time to get back in there and go through another round of torture. And speaking of which, the shadows in this dungeon were way harder than the previous, as I can easily die to the shadows in only just the first floor. Seeing how hard these shadows were, I decided to just grind in Yukiko's dungeon only, which is kind of a bad idea since I won't be getting the items for armor and weapons, but trust me guys, I can manage, okay? Anyways, after a while of grinding, I went back to the sauna and then run into the next mid-boss. Nothing too challenging about this shadow, as his pattern is just raising his attack, using Rebellion, and then attacking. So obviously, just block on the 3rd turn when he's gonna attack. He even ran out of SP at the end, so yeah, this shadow was basically a joke. After that, we find Kanji with his shadow, and you already know at this point, shadow gets denied, and we fight. Now, from what it looks, it may seem impossible just because it's 3 against 1, but that just didn't happen to be the case. In fact, it's actually a lot easier than it seems. Basically, the tough guy on the right is weak to fire, and when he gets knocked, the nice guy on the right will use Ripatra every time, and he doesn't even do that much damage since Illigor resists physical damage. Seeing this, I can easily take out the tough guy with no problem. One thing to note though is don't hit him again to make him dizzy, because the nice guy will use a firewall instead, so yeah, it'll just make things harder, so yeah, just knock and you'll be good. As for taking out the nice guy, it took me a lot longer to do so, because if I switched out of Illigor, I can easily die to his physical moves, but other than that, I was still able to take him out. Now it was time for the real deal, and fight Shadow Kanji. Now, just from fighting both of the guys, you might have already noticed that one turn he attacks with either Zio or physical moves, and the next he goes for either Forbidden Murmur or Roar of Wrath. Forbidden Murmur is the one we need to worry about, as that one affects us. Now, it's completely random which one of the 2 moves he'll use, so I just recommend blocking no matter what. And this is all that happens for a while, and nothing changes until more than half of his HP is gone, where in this phase, he starts going for Fanatical Spark, which does a ton of electric damage. But there is a way to avoid it since he does have a pattern here. Basically, every time he uses Spirit Dream, he will immediately go for Fanatical Spark right after, so you can just switch to a persona that nulls, or in my case, resist Elect since I forgot, and then block. And since he's just going to use Spirit Drain a lot, I can only attack him with physical moves. But other than that, the fight wasn't really hard, but it just takes an insane amount of time to even get through. Regardless, I was able to pull through and win the fight. And honestly, I'm even surprised that this was possible. I was kind of expecting the run to end here, but the 2 guys from the beginning weren't even that hard, and I'm also assuming it might have been from how many times I've increased Illigor's stats through the shuffle time, since I had him equipped the whole time while I was grinding in Yukiko's dungeon. So yeah, that might have been why. But yeah, it is actually possible to beat this dungeon solo, and so after that, Kanji accepts himself and awakens to Takemikazuchi, and once again, we go to another waiting period. So while we're waiting, I begin Margaret's social link and then hung out with a few other people, and now Kanji's back after a couple weeks. And since nothing much happens during this time period, I maxed out Yosuke's social link and began Yumi and Dojima's social links. And a few days later, we see another person on the Midnight Channel. We couldn't tell at first, But a couple nights later, we can now see that Rise Fujikawa is on the Midnight Channel, so it was back to the TV world to save our save her from getting killed. Now, the shadows in this dungeon weren't as harsh as the shadows in Kanji's, but they do get a lot harder in later floors, so I just grinded in the first 3 floors for this dungeon. The mid-boss once again was too easy, as all you need to do is hit him with fire moves, since that's his weakness, and then block right after. Once we get to the end of the dungeon, we find Rise and the usual happens. Now, remember how earlier I said that grinding in just Yukiko's dungeon and not in Kanji's was a bad idea? Well, this is a clear example why, because Shadow Rise actually gave me a hard time since her moves deal a lot of damage to me, and I don't even deal as much to her. So yeah, I'm actually making this look a lot harder than it seems, or maybe it was always hard, and I just suck. Either way, there is actually a pattern here that did help me. Basically, she'll use a specific break move, which in my case is fire, and she'll just keep hitting me with that same specific move until it wears off. Once it wears off, it gives us a good opportunity to heal and then attack right after, and then the whole process repeats. Even though this plan may sound ridiculous, like I said, I'm making this look a lot harder than it seems because, 1, I'm an idiot, and 2, that's exactly why I'm playing on very hard, because I hate myself. Jokes aside though, I was still able to manage, and after taking half of her HP, she goes for a move called Supreme Insight, and at this point it's all scripted, so you just have to block for 3 turns. Teddy then handles the rest himself and defeats Shadow Rise. So unfortunately, it is not possible to beat Persona 4 Golden while only using Narukami, as we got help from Teddy. Good night, everyone. I'm just kidding, guys. Obviously, this doesn't count since it's scripted. But yeah, anyways, Shadow Rise is down, so Rise then accepts herself and gains the persona Himiko. But we're not done yet. Teddy's shadow decided to come out of him, and now we get ourselves into another fight. Now, honestly, I don't even know how to explain this fight at all. Like, the first phase was okay, no problem, but then after that, there's like no consistency to his patterns. Like, I swear, throughout the middle and end of the fight, he kept changing things up. All what I know is that anytime he decreases your defense, he'll go for physical moves. Whenever he goes for Foolish Whisper, he'll Mind Charge, and whenever he Mind Charges, he's obviously going to use Bufala after. But like I said, there's no consistency to this. Like, sometimes he'll just straight up go for Bufala when before he'd only use it whenever he Mind Charges. And yeah, there's just no consistency to this. I really just attacked whenever I had the chance to do so, and it was mostly when my defense wasn't decreased, because obviously I'd be dead very easily. And that's pretty much the only problem I had with this fight. His nullity guidance wasn't much of a big deal since my HP was always full, and I could even block his nihil hand. And again, I did make both of these fights a lot harder for myself since I didn't have the items from Kanji's dungeon to make better armor and weapons. So yeah, that's just really all on me. But regardless, I was able to defeat him after all that pain he's given me. And yeah, then Teddy accepts himself, and now comes another waiting period where I just continue to social link grind by beginning both Kanji and Eyes, and a few days later our school teacher is somehow dead the same way the past murders were, which doesn't make any sense since he didn't even appear on the Midnight Channel, and now we're completely thrown off from this. A couple weeks later, a kid named Mitsuo Kubo appears on the Midnight Channel who claims that he's the one who killed our teacher and went inside the TV himself to hide from the cops. So, back to the TV world to catch the murderer ourselves. Once again, the shadows weren't that harsh, but later, this dungeon became extremely easy because I was now able to fuse Black Frost, and I think you already know the deal. Like, seriously, I can absorb both fire and ice skills, which are skills most of the shadows in this dungeon use. Oh, and I also figured out a new strat of gaining SP. Since Black Frost has Invigorate 1, I will be able to replenish 3 SP every turn. I decided to use this strat on shadows that are either dumb or whose attacks I can absorb since it's a lot easier to do it on them, and then just guard. Now sure, this does seem like it'll take a while, but honestly I find this a lot more convenient than having to grind for Snuff Souls for like an hour. Especially where I'm at a point where I have to be using 2 of them and they'd be gone a lot faster. But don't worry, I can upgrade to Invigorate 3 since now I can get the Magician cards in shuffle time. As we move forward, we encounter the next mid-boss, and once again, too easy. Basically, the Killing Hand will summon an Almighty Hand who is there to just heal him, and all you have to do is Mind Charge and use Mabufala since the Almighty Hand is weak to ice, and it even deals a lot of damage to the Killing Hand. Very easy and simple, and after we take him down, we find Mitsuo at the end with his shadow, and you guessed it, we have to fight his shadow. Now honestly, since I have Black Frost and other good personas, I thought this fight was going to be a cakewalk. Until I remembered one thing about Shadow Mitsuo that is very, very problematic. And I think I just need to show you what it is. So yeah, he gets to have 2 turns, and on top of that, there are even almighty moves. You know, the only skill that we can't null, reflect, or absorb. Yeah, that skill. As you can see, I clearly had no chance at that fight in any way, and not even healing or having a high endurance persona could even save me from that. Like seriously, this is literally an unfair advantage since we're only one person, and it just sucks since these are bosses that are meant to be fought with 4 party members, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, what now? Does that mean the run is dead? Well, not really. There is actually a way to get around him. But I think you guys are not gonna like the idea. Now, before you guys even say, Nintendroid, how dare you overlevel yourself by a lot? That just defeats the whole purpose of a challenge. First off, let me finish explaining myself, and then you guys can talk. After leveling myself up to 62, I decided to go back into the real world just to sell the items to get better armor and weapons from Daedra. Then went back into the TV world after a few days with social links, and since I was level 62, I decided to fuse Kinky and Tamlin. And now, it was time to go back and see if we can finally beat him. So here was the plan. My main problem was his hero form since his almighty moves are very strong. Now, I can be able to take it out very easily in only 3 hits as Black Frost, so I had to play this out very carefully. Once his hero form was gone, we can now fight the actual Shadow. Thankfully, he isn't as strong as his hero form, so there wasn't much to worry about. Basically what I had to do here was raise my attack, Mind Charge, and then hit him with an Agadine as soon as he starts to reconstruct his hero form, and it only takes 1 hit to break it apart. However, I won't have many chances to do this since he reconstructs a lot quicker as he takes more hits. Another thing to note is that as he's reconstructing, he'll start going for Evil Touch, which grants Fierce status, and if it hits you and skips your turn, he'll go for Ghastly Wail, which insta-kills you. And that's pretty much the reason why I fused Tamlin, since he nulls Fear, and there's no other way for me to do so. Once he's completely reconstructed, the whole process repeats, and it gets a lot harder now since he starts using the item and spell moves, but the plan was still working. In fact, the plan all worked as I was able to finally put an end to this Shadow's nonsense. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you all, it literally took me almost a week to even get past this Shadow because of everything I did to make this plan work. So despite me over-leveling myself, this boss was still very hard, and in fact, this was actually the hardest one of the run. So really, I don't think there's any reason for y'all to get mad at me for doing this because there was just a lot of pain and suffering to this fight still. So yeah, the run is still alive, Shadow Mitsuo is defeated, And yeah, we finally caught the murders, so now we can finally enjoy the rest of our summer and not have to worry about anything. We pretty much enjoy our summer by going to a summer festival, go on a beach trip, and watch the fireworks show. And now it was back to school for us. A week later, we visit Port Island where Persona 3 took place, and then spend the night at the... this place. Yeah, this, where I had to fight you and you. Good one, game. Anyways, we spend the next few days getting drunk and all, and then head back home, and then begin Eddie's social link, and a couple days later, another person appears on the Midnight Channel, and the next night, we can see that the person is Naoto Shirogane. So, yeah, I lied. The case isn't over yet, and people are still getting thrown in, which means Run has to keep on going. Before we go back into the TV though, I decided to max out Ko and begin Hisano's social links, and then begin our mission to save Naoto. Now because I overleveled Shadow Naoto by 8 levels, I decided to completely ignore the shadows in this dungeon and just get straight into everything. The mid-boss, as always, is a joke since all he does is physical moves and I have Kinky who knows that, so I decided to just rush this and then he decides to end himself with a last resort. After that, we make it to the end of the dungeon, and you already know how this goes. Shadow gets denied, and then we have to fight. So yeah, time to fight now. Now in this fight, there are 3 phases. The first phase, she only goes for Brave Blade and Mute Ray, which silences us if it connects. And so for this phase, I recommend sticking with a persona that either knows or reflects physical moves. And yeah, nothing too crazy happens here. After taking half of her HP, she uses a move called Element 0, which then leads into Galgalum Eyes, which drops our HP to 1 and causes innervation. She does this for 3 turns straight, and then we begin the next phase, where she starts using magic skills. I decided to stay on Black Frost for this one since he can absorb 2 out of the 4 skills. Again, nothing too crazy happening here, and after taking a quarter of her HP, we now get into the final phase where she starts using both her Brave Blade and all of her magic skills. Now honestly for me, I felt like sticking with Kinky was the best option for this phase, because while Black Frost can absorb 2 out of the magic skills she has, which was actually going smooth at first, sometimes I get unlucky and she crits me with her Brave Blade, and this literally happened 3 times in a row as it was about to end. So yeah, that's why I felt like Kinky was the best option for this phase, and it even worked out in the end, so not a big deal anyway. Naoto then accepts herself, and now comes another waiting period. During this time, I began Naoki's social link and maxed out Dojima, Nanako, Marie, and Risei's social links, then began Naoto's and maxed out Yukiko's social links. Then came the school festival where the girls got us into a cross-dressing contest, and Teddy gets the girls to do a swimsuit one. Then I maxed out Yumi and Sayoko's social links, and the next night, we see another person on the Midnight Channel, and it's pretty hard to tell who it even is. Next night, a warning letter gets delivered to our home, and Dojima was not very happy about it as it has something to do with the case and he didn't want us to have any involvement with it. He decides to take us in and leaves us there for the night, and later on, the Midnight Channel came on, and we can now see that the person on it is Nanako. And yeah, out of all times to leave her alone at the house, this was absolutely the very worst time to do so. And so, yeah, Naoto immediately ran to our house to try and save her from getting kidnapped, but it was too late. The killer got to her. At first, we don't even know who it is, but after some discussion, we've come to the conclusion that it is a delivery man named Taro Namatame. We then give the info to Dojima, and he was able to find Namatame on the road, but things didn't go too well as the chase ended in a crash. Namatame was nowhere to be found, and as for Nanako, we figured he'd already thrown her into the TV. So once again, we begin another rescue mission. The shadows here were once again not hard since they can all easily be taken out with their weaknesses, and yeah, nothing to complain about here. And the mid-boss, which was a world balance, died in only 3 hits. Like dude, I swear these mid-bosses are just a million times easier than the Tartarus Guardians in Persona 3. And before we get to the end, I should let you all know that earlier I fused Clotho because she's going to be very important for this upcoming fight, and you'll all see why. I then get to the end and find that Namatame also happened to jump in the TV world and has Nanako with him. We were able to get her out of his hands, and as expected, he goes berserk, and now we have to fight. But this time, we're not fighting a shadow, and instead, we're fighting someone named Kurino Sagiri, who is the Japanese spirit of fog. Now in this fight, Kurino Sagiri pretty much just uses all of the magic skills, so just like with Shadow Naoto, I just have to keep Black Frost on since he can absorb 2 of the 4 magic skills. In fact, I was even lucky that most of the time he was using Agadine and Bufudine for the most part, so there was almost nothing to worry about. After we take half of his HP, he starts going for a move called Quad Converge, which increases the damage of a random magic skill for him, whereas it is weakened for me. Now remember how I said that Klotho was going to be important? Well, that's because she used a skill called Makarakarn, which reflects magic skills. So anytime he used this move, I could just reflect back at him and do so much damage to him. And yeah, that was pretty much the strat. See, I told you she was going to be important. Now, the only thing to worry about is the Unerring Justice, which nearly kills you if you're at full HP, so that's something to watch out for. But other than that, this boss was not much of a problem, and we were able to take him down. Nanako is now saved, and now we just wait for what's to come next. As always, I just continue the social link grind and begin shoes and maxed out Naoto and Hisano's, and later on, Inaba gets shrouded in fog for some reason. At first, we had no idea why, but later on, we realized that the fog from the TV world could possibly be seeping into the real world, as the glasses that help us see through the fog in the TV world even work in our world. Later that day, Adachi calls us saying that Nanako's condition got worse, so we rushed back to the hospital to check up on her, and unfortunately, she dies. And no matter how many times I have seen this scene, yeah, this will always make me cry. We then go to Namatame's room to see what he's up to, and this scene is a very important one as you'll be given 6 answer prompts. There's only one right answer for each, so if you choose wrong, the game will end here and you'll get a bad ending. Now sure, I can simply do that and end the run here and say, yeah, it is definitely possible, but let's just go a little further to see how far we can go now. After answering correctly 6 times, we max out the full social link and begin the judgment. After that, we find out that Nanako is actually still alive, so yay, hooray for us! But then Teddy went missing. Next day we have another discussion about the case, and then we decided to go hear Namatame's side of the story. And as it turns out, he actually isn't the killer. So yeah, next day we then think about it again to see who the real killer can be, and we've come to conclude that it is Adachi. We then confront him at the hospital, and he pretty much gives himself away and then runs off and goes into the TV world. Later that night, Teddy appears in the Velvet Room, and we max out his social link. He also comes back and helps us find Adachi, and when we got to him, Adachi basically admits that he was the killer and that he also tricked Namatame into throwing people into the TV for his own purposes. Adachi then runs away, but later that night we came to confront him ourselves, and unfortunately it didn't work and we can no longer talk to our friend anymore. And so the Jester social link becomes the Hunger. Now, before we begin his dungeon, I decided to use the remaining time I have to grind out some social links, because if I beat the dungeon now, it'll skip to December 23rd, so I used this time to max out Kanji and Shu social links, and then went back into the TV world to begin Adachi's dungeon. Once again, and I think no surprise at this point, the shadows were too easy. In fact, it became a lot easier once I got a persona that can reflect physical moves, so I could pretty much rush for the most part. And once I reached level 79, it was time to bring out the biggest carrier for the remainder of the run. Pixie! No, I'm kidding guys, it's Yoshitsune. So yeah, I don't think I need to explain much since I'm pretty sure most of us have been here before. But before we go and give him Hasotobi, let's just give this envious giant a chance since all the mid-bosses were too easy. And hey, this shadow was actually able to give me a challenge since all he goes for is Tentararfu and Megidolan. If you get hit by Tentararfu, your turn will most likely get skipped, and he'll go for Megidolan twice, and it will kill you. Now, again, this is kind of another one of those bosses where you have to be really patient with, or you're just gonna die because, you were just being too reckless. So yeah, pretty much just attack whenever you have the opportunity to do so, and you'll be good. So yeah, with that said, he's done for, and later we unlock Hasotobi for Yoshitsune, and the run is pretty much set at this point. We then reach Adachi, and then the obvious happens. We fight him. Now, Adachi pretty much did nothing in this fight besides maybe just killing my homunculus, because all he can do is physical, wind, and electric skills, and also evil, smile, and Madoon. which only one of those skills he can hit me with, since Yoshitsune nulls physical, absorbs wind, reflects electric, and I even gave him null fear just so Evil Smile can't connect. So really, the only way to lose this fight is by getting unlucky and having his Madoon connect, but as I said earlier, I had a homunculus so it didn't matter. And the fight was over without even taking damage from him. But it doesn't end there yet, as he turns into Amino Sagiri, who is another Japanese spirit of fog. Now, just like Kunino Sagiri, he uses every magic skill, including some of his own like God's Judgment, Agni Astra, and whatnot, and he also gets to have 2 turns. Unlike Shadow Mitsuo, however, he wasn't as obnoxious, most likely because he doesn't use his almighty moves as much, and that I'm also immune to 4 of the skills he uses. What really got me though in this fight was his Galgalim Eyes, and then dying right after, but I still had Risei's Revive on deck, and now that it's used, I had to be more careful. Another thing to watch out for was his Bewildering Fog, where you can't hit him at all and he just uses that time to buff himself so he can kill me, so I suggest you raise your defense and be ready to block his Nebula Oculus, or whatever you call it. Overall, I wouldn't say this boss is hard, but again, it's another one of those bosses where you have to be patient and wait so you don't die. At least in just like the last phase of this fight. After a while, I was able to defeat him, and yeah, we finally caught the killer, the fog is gone, the case is over, and with that, we max out the Judgment social link. But our journey doesn't end here yet. Shortly after we solve the case, Margaret tells us that Marie left the Velvet Room and went missing. We don't know exactly where she could be, but Margaret was willing to go find her for us. So while we wait for Margaret to go find Marie, I decided to max out the remaining social links, being Naoki, I, Eddie, the Fox, and even Margaret. And since I had nothing else to do, I decided to also unlock all of the 3rd awakenings. After that was our ski trip, where we get lost with the boys, find a shed to warm up in, and then a TV randomly turns on. We try to investigate it, and as Che took a closer look, we all get pulled in and find ourselves in a place called the Hollow Forest. This happens to be the place Marie came to when she left the Velvet Room for whatever reason. Now, because this is in the TV world, that means we have to fight once more to be able to save Marie. So, here we go again! Now, unlike every other dungeon, this is probably the most gimmicky one out of all. For instance, all of your items and equipment have been taken away, and your SP gets halved after every battle. So throughout this whole dungeon, you'll be given armor that repels certain magic skills, items that replenish your SP every turn, which is similar to Invigorate, and break items to remove immunity to certain magic skills. And these are all items that you can only use in this dungeon. So basically, you have to work with what the game is giving you to create new strategies. Now fortunately, that wasn't much of a problem for me, since I just need a repel ice armor so Yoshitsune can basically be fully immune. And if you remember the SP strat I told you about in Mitsuo's dungeon, nothing about the dungeon's gimmicks even became a problem for me. So yeah, I was pretty much treating this as a normal day in the office. But then I came across the first mid-boss in this dungeon, where this was actually the first and only mid-boss that actually gave me a lot of trouble. And no, the Envious Giant doesn't count. So, yeah, anyways, what was the problem with this mid-boss, you ask? Well, 1, he gets to have 2 turns, and 2, he summons other enemies. Now, literally all this shadow does is spam Spirit Drain and ailment moves, and so I had to be careful with what persona I had equipped, because if I ever got hit with Fear or Silence, things could go wrong. Another thing too is that hitting his weakness, which is physical moves, doesn't even do any damage to him, which literally makes no sense. Like seriously, how do you not take that much damage if you're getting hit with your weakness? But I did have another option, and that was Mind Charge plus Megidolon. And it actually does an insane amount of damage to him, and even kills all the other shadows too. The problem though is that he'll just keep on summoning more shadows as they die, and even stronger ones as his HP decreases. And once he was nearly dead, he started summoning the Call Machine, so I had to be extra careful in this phase. So yeah, this is once again another one of those times where you have to be careful, and one wrong move will cause your death. But after a while, I was finally able to beat the Gorgeous King, and also got rid of the Call Machine right after, and as for the next mid-boss, well, he's just like every other. We then reach the end and find Marie there. She then tells us that the reason she came here was because she wanted to die because she's the same as the two Sagiris and thought it'd be best for her to die there so the fog can go away completely. We didn't want that to happen, so we decided to fight her to knock her out of it. Now, this fight is pretty simple as she does have a pattern here. First she goes for Mind Charge and Megidolon right after, then she does nothing and then another Megidolon. So all you need to do is just block the Mind Charge variant of the move and then Mind Charge yourself and throw out your own Megidolon. Nothing too crazy here. After we take a quarter of her HP, she uses a move called Shell of Denial, and then the fight is all scripted at this point. So you just need to block. After that, she turns into Kasumi no Okami, which is the true form of Marie that took control of her after absorbing the fog from both of the Sagiris after they were defeated. So now we have to defeat this form of her in order for the fog to go away completely and save Marie from it. Now, one thing to note about Kasumi is that she nulls every move, including physical, so Yoshitsune will be useless in this fight. Now, as I said before, throughout this dungeon, you should have been getting break items from the chests or battles, and they're meant to be used in this fight specifically. I decided to attack her with only Zyodyne because it was the strongest magic skill I had, and because I could also reflect back and do more damage to her. And if you guys are wondering what happened to Black Frost, well, I might have thrown him out and then refused him just so I could unlock Margaret's rank 6 because my shuffle times were too unlucky and then I got impatient, so yeah, that happened. Anyways, back to the fight. So as for Kasumi, she uses every magic skill and some of her own almighty moves. Obviously the regular magic skills are nothing to worry about, but her almighty moves are the ones you need to watch out for. Now, I really have only one thing to say about this fight, and it is a pretty serious warning. Whenever she goes for Cry of Denial, just block because next turn she'll go for Hot Lightning, and if you don't block it, it'll make you dizzy, and basically you'll be stuck on this loop forever. Like, seriously, I'm not joking. If you don't block after she uses Cry of Denial, you'll be stuck on the same loop forever. So, yeah. That is pretty much the most important thing to keep in mind for this fight, but other than that, there's nothing much to worry about. With all that said, Kasumi was done for, and Marie is now saved. Later that night, we went to a hot spring where the girls were trying to enjoy themselves, but Yosuke and Teddy couldn't help it and just wanted to have a peep, and then things didn't go too well for them as the wall fell, and yeah, I don't think much needs to be said. So yeah, after that, there's pretty much nothing else to do besides enjoy the rest of our time in Inaba since we go back home in 1 month. And as the days flew by, our last day in Inaba had arrived, so we decided to say goodbye to every social link we maxed out and then the game asked us if we wanted to go home. Now, you may think it's all over just because it's our last day here and that the case is solved and all, but it's actually not. There's still more to this, and it's something that gets overlooked simply because this portion is mostly related to the first 5 minutes of the game. Yeah, you actually have to remember from that long ago 60 hours later. But anyways, what you have to do is say no and then go to the Juness food court. At first we were chilling with our friends for one last time, and then we began to reminisce about this past year. Then we started questioning why this all even happened. Like, why does the Midnight Channel exist? How did this rumor even spread? And most importantly, how you, Adachi, and Namatame even gained the ability to enter TVs. Then we remembered we got a letter from Adachi, and in his letter he tells us that he remembers learning about the Midnight Channel from someone when he first came to Inaba before the rumors even started. This was also the same case for Namatame since he had also heard about it when first coming to town. After that, we maxed out his social link, and yes, I maxed out every one of them in case you were wondering. But anyways, basically, whoever told Adachi and Namatame about the Midnight Channel is the same person that gave us all our powers and is also the same person behind the Midnight Channel's existence. From what it seems, this person had to have been someone we met when we first came to Inaba. And who was it, you ask? Well, it was the gas station attendant. As we encounter her, she reveals that she is a goddess named Izanami who is the one behind everything, and now that she knows we figured out everything, she decided to go into the TV world and wait for us there to settle everything. And here we are, the final dungeon for this run. Now, even though this was the last dungeon, It was still a normal one for me since 1, it functions like the rest minus the hollow forest, and 2, the shadows were not hard at all, no surprise. The first mid-boss, which was a Neo-Minotaur, dies by just reflecting his physical moves, and the sleeping table dies with only 2 hostile Tobis. And honestly, I just find it how the one mid-boss from P3 that everyone complains about is way easier in this game. But anyways, I decided to grind up to level 99 after that, and it didn't take too long since I could easily beat the Golden Hands with Yoshitsune. And once I got to level 99, it was time. This is it. This is the final battle. This is the fight to determine the run. We've come so far, and it is time to see whether it is possible or not to beat this game solo. Now, the first phase of this fight is nothing too crazy happening. Just like with the 2 Sagiris, she uses every magic skill. The only one that is problematic is Megidolan, especially when she mind charges it. So yeah, that's like the only thing to watch out for. One thing I'll say is that even though there wasn't much trouble in this phase, I would say it's best to make sure your HP is always above 300, because if it is below 300, then most likely Risei will use her block. It's best to save it for the next phase, as well as her revive, since right now there's not much to worry about. As for me, I only attack with some charged Hasotobis, and as I take away all of her HP, I use the Orb of Sight I got from Igor, and then we reveal Izanami's true form, Izanami no Okami. Now here's what makes this phase a lot harder. 1, she gets 2 turns. 2, she has some of her own almighty moves that deal so much damage, and 3, she has moves like Galgalum Eyes and World's End. So here's a very important tip for this fight. Always use Heat Riser. The buffs are going to be a huge help because, as I said before, she gets 2 turns and her almighty moves like Fury of Yasugami and Kura Ikuzuchi do so much damage that the increased defense will help you not take that much damage. And on top of that, you'll even have a better chance of dodging her moves with the increased agility. Like seriously, most of the time I was able to dodge her moves because of this. So it's important to always use Heat Riser for this phase. Now as for Galgalum Eyes and World's End, well, she uses Galgalum Eyes after half of her HP is taken away, and then after that she goes for a move called Summons Tayami, which will instantly kill you because of Enervasion. Now, remember when I said it was important to have Risei's block or revive available for this phase? This is exactly what I was talking about. So unless you're lucky and dodge the move or have a null Enervate item or something, then you're gonna need Risei for this. Now luckily she only uses this move once, but later you'll have to deal with World's End, which grants any type of ailment move. Now luckily you can easily dodge this one, as you can easily tell when she'll throw it out. Basically she'll go for Stagnant Air first and then Mind Charge, so yeah, if you ever see her do that, that is your cue to block and prevent from being hit with ailments. And that's pretty much all that you should be concerned about with this fight. Overall, it's just another one of those moments where you'll have to be extremely careful, and I mean very extremely, because you have to always keep buffing and healing yourself and then attack whenever you can, and sometimes it could get frustrating because then you have to be here for a while, but if you get too impatient, then yeah, it'll be all over for you. And that's all what I could say for this fight. Once we get all of her HP down, she used a move called 1000 Curses where we're pretty much erased from existence, but then we get motivation from all of our friends, and then Izanagi evolves into Izanagi no Kami. We come back and show Izanami that her power means nothing, and then show her what ours is. And with that, I can confidently say that yes, you can beat Persona 4 Golden while only using Narukami, meaning you can beat every boss there is out there and clear whatever ending route you want solo. Honestly, I'm even surprised that this was possible because, as I said earlier, I was expecting the run to end at the Shadow Kanji fight, but it turned out a lot easier than it should have. And then there was also the Shadow Mitsuo fight, which there I thought it was over, but hey, I was actually able to make it possible. So yeah, really the Shadow Mitsuo fight was the only hurdle that got in my way during this run. Overall, I would say that this run was way easier than the Persona 3 run, simply because 1. The mid-bosses were a lot easier than the Tartarus Guardians, and 2. Yoshitsune and Black Frost. Seriously, these guys were the biggest carries of this run. And if I were to rate the difficulty, I'd give it a 5 out of 10, just because the early game was a bit harsh, but it got a lot easier after Mitsuo's dungeon. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Doing these challenge runs may be painful, but also fun at the same time, just because I like to try and play these games in a different way. If you're new here or came from the Persona 3 video and made it this far, hello everyone, my name is Nintendroid, and as you can tell, I like to suffer by doing Persona challenge runs and play Smash online for YouTube content. If you enjoy watching these types of videos, then consider hitting that sub button and that like button. It helps me out and would mean a lot if you do so. And also, if you want to see me play Smash or other games live, then head on over to my Twitch at NintendroidSSB. And with all that said, I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you all in the next video.